What better way to get an understanding of Baldur's Gate 3 than to learn some of the lore behind the game? Settle down, travelers, grab a cup of coffee, enjoy the fire, and let's talk lore. There's so much lore behind this place that I could make 100 YouTube videos, but most of us don't have the attention span for that. So instead, I'm compiling all of the information that I think you should know that relates specifically to Baldur's Gate 3. If you guys do enjoy this video, please subscribe. I've been releasing videos for Baldur's Gate 3 for a while now, and I have a lot of plans for this weekend and the week to come. So the two most important topics to talk about, in my opinion, are 1, the city of Baldur's Gate, and 2, the Mind Flayers. Baldur's Gate is the main setting of this game, as well as the previous Baldur's Gates. I guess that makes sense considering it's the title of the games. There's a lot of good history in the city, with many things that should be known before you embark on your Baldur's Gate 3 journey. The Mind Flayers we have seen in every Baldur's Gate 3 cinematic, and probably every single picture of Baldur's Gate 3 as well. They will be a strong part of your story, so if you want to know what that parasite that's been implanted in your head is, make sure to stick around for the second half of this video. Baldur's Gate, also referred to as just the Gate, is a large city-state within the continent of Faerûn. You will hear Faerûn mentioned a lot. It's a large continent on the planet of Toril. This is the continent that all of the Legend of Drizzt books took place on. I highly recommend that book series if you want to get into the Dungeons & Dragons universe. Baldur's Gate is a city on the Sword Coast. It's a crowded city of commerce and opportunity. With a crowded city also typically comes quite a lot of crime and shady businesses, which you can find plenty of in Baldur's Gate, even though overall it's known to be a safe and clean city. The city is divided into 3 main parts: the upper city, which is the walled region to the north, typically home to the wealthy; the lower city, which is the southern part between the old wall and the river; and the outer city, which was the shanty town outside of the city walls. Baldur's Gate for the most part is known as a neutral city. However, the leaders of Baldur's Gate were members of the Lord's Alliance of Powers in the West. The Lord's Alliance, also known as the Council of Lords, was a partnership of merchant cities that formed to oppose the growing influence of the Black Network, a mercenary band, and the Shadow Thieves of Amn, who were a secretive thieves guild. Baldur's Gate has 2 sets of law enforcement, the Watch and the Flaming Fists. The Watch are civil constables who patrolled Baldur's Gate's upper city, which was the wealthy region, and the Flaming Fists patrolled mainly the lower city. I would definitely be prepared to encounter both of these organizations while in Baldur's Gate. The Watch were easily recognizable, and they took pride in knowing the faces of all the residents in the upper city. The Flaming Fists were much different. They were a mercenary band, a very powerful and expensive mercenary band, and were motivated by the promise of riches and glory. The Flaming Fists also had bands in other regions. They definitely have some rivals, and sometimes they err on the edge of actually promoting order. I'm sure we will encounter a couple of their bad eggs along our travels. Just look for the Flaming Fists logo and you found them. The region that Baldur's Gate is located in is well known for getting its fair share of cloudy, foggy, rainy weather. Because of this, clever advanced water systems were created to collect runoff rainwater in an underground basin, which was then maneuvered through subterranean aqueducts that emptied into large tanks for storing water. Despite the city being overall fairly clean, the mass amounts of rain oftentimes promoted the growth of mildew, which gave off a musky smell. Sometimes you might even find straw or gravel coated along the roads to help with the slippery conditions. Baldur's Gate overall was known to be a very inclusive city full of a variety of races, creeds, and personal histories, so expect to see many interesting folk on your travels throughout the city. There are many places of worship throughout Baldur's Gate, some of which accept all faiths, such as the Twin Songs. You might see temples and shrines scattered throughout dedicated to a variety of different gods. Even shrines that were devoted to the worship of evil could be found, and were mostly tolerated by the Flaming Fists. Throughout its history, various thieves guilds have risen and fallen in Baldur's Gate, perhaps the most famous of which is known as the Guild. As far as foreign matters go, Baldur's Gate was a neutral power, and few have actually tried to seize the city. One major reason being how well defended Baldur's Gate was by its massive walls and the well-trained Flaming Fist soldiers. The longest enmity that Baldur's Gate had was with its southern neighbor Amn, and the two regions nearly went to war with each other on various occasions. Other than Amn, Baldur's Gate has been threatened by pirates operating out of Luskan, otherwise known as the City of Sals, and also by the merchants of Waterdeep, who have a deep resentment for the continual growth of wealth and power that Baldur's Gate experiences. Before we talk about the Mind Flayers, let's quickly talk about the Outer City, which we will find ourselves in Baldur's Gate 3. The Outer City was filled with shanties, lean-tos, and stockyards. Muddy streets were a normal sight. The Outer City is rarely taken seriously, and even though it was technically ruled over by the Grand Dukes, city officials do little to watch over this area. So that's a little history for the city of Baldur's Gate. There's actually so much more to talk about, but we don't have time in this video. Let's get right into the Mind Flayers. So the octopus alien looking creatures that look to be taking over the city of Baldur's Gate are known as the Mind Flayers or Illithids. They are evil, sadistic creatures, meaning they take pleasure from inflicting pain and suffering on others, and they are not of the natural world. Mind Flayers are feared by most sentient creatures, which means us. The Mind Flayers seek to expand their dominion over all other creatures by controlling their minds and using them as hopeless slaves, or they use them to devour their brains for sustenance. One of the main races that has been enslaved by them is the Githyanki, which are actually a playable race in Baldur's Gate 3. I will definitely do a separate video on the lore behind the Githyanki. Mind Flayers are respected by some of the more evil races out there, such as the Drow, for their psionic abilities are pretty incredible. These alien-looking creatures are oftentimes found dwelling in the Underdark, and they are warm-blooded amphibians. If you have the pleasure of killing one of them, they will probably bleed a silvery white color. Hopefully all of us get to see them bleed versus being enslaved by them. These tyrants, slavers, and planar voyagers view themselves as masterminds, which technically they are. Mind Flayers can be seen cooperating with one another, but once it's apparent that a situation might not be as profitable for themselves, they have no problem backing out. They will attempt to mentally dominate basically every non-Illithid that they come across. The Githyanki hunt them relentlessly on the backs of their red dragons. They are brave, but they are also seeking complete and total revenge for the enslavement of their people. The abilities that Mind Flayers possess are for the most part mental abilities. They lack in the physical abilities category, but that's really not a problem for them. They will often use a powerful mind blast that can affect multiple foes at once, which will stun them, leaving them open prey for the Mind Flayer to feed on their brains. Once it has its victim in its grasp, it will then attach its 4 tentacles to the head of the victim and begin sucking out the brain. If they do not need to feed, they could use an array of mind-affecting abilities to essentially turn the victims into slaves. Don't forget guys, they can levitate as well, and they can also detect the thoughts of nearby creatures. Illithids are without male or female biological sex, and once or twice in their lifetime they will lay a clutch of eggs from which tadpoles will hatch. This is where it starts to get good. These tadpoles, like we see in the cinematic, are kept in the Elder Brain Tank, where they are fed brains by their caretakers, and also they eat each other. This phase would last for around 10 years. Tadpoles that survive this process will then be able to be put through that's a hard word to say. Seromorphosis. I think I said it right. This is where a tadpole is implanted into the brains of a humanoid victim, like we see again in this cinematic. It will slowly devour its brain and eventually merge with the body, transforming it into a new Mind Flayer. Not all species are suitable hosts, but you can bet that your character is, and I hate to tell you, this is how you start the game in Baldur's Gate 3, with a tadpole in your brain. Now, if a tadpole for some reason did not undergo the seromorphosis, they would become ravenous creatures known as illithocytes, which eventually turn into neothelids. Dude, these words are insane. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong. We might see some of these creatures in the game as well. The large ship that you guys see the Mind Flayer using to traverse the plains is called a nautiloid. They are pretty scary looking. These nautiloids were bizarre flying ships that were employed by Mind Flayers to travel directly between worlds and through the astral plane. The astral plane is another plane of existence. It would take a whole nother video to get into that, but the astral plane might come into play in Baldur's Gate 3. It will be interesting to see. Like Baldur's Gate itself, there is still a ton to talk about with the Mind Flayers, but at least now you have a basic understanding of what you are getting yourself into with Baldur's Gate 3. Thanks so much for watching, guys. If you guys enjoyed the video, please like, comment, and subscribe. I really appreciate it. I will continue to do Baldur's Gate 3 videos. In fact, right now it's almost 4 in the morning. I'm just banging these out day and night, trying to get some good content out there for you guys. I also do a ton of other videos on this channel, ranging from comedy videos to live streams to tutorials to game reviews to product reviews, etc. I would love to see some of you guys on a future video. Until next time, Wolfpack.